Well, hello. I'm Dr. Chris Lemmon, retired, and I've got a blog site, which is wizardscatch.com, WIZARDSCACHE.com. And if you're looking at this YouTube video, you're on my YouTube channel, which is Wizards Catch, same name. So kind of a bit of a philosopher, a teacher, I don't know, just an old retired guy. But I'm just bouncing some ideas around. I did a talk. I used to have a center, and we used to do a lot of work that had to do with personality development and for years. So I have students out there, past students, mostly just friends. They do ask questions, and I've had a lot of questions down through the years. So I'm using this as a vehicle to answer those questions. I did one just recently on people asking can't remember that people asking the question why life change is so difficult. And so I did one on called life streams. And it is a challenge because it's not a simple change. It's not a change in the story in your head, changing in everything. So this might add some clarity to that. The question that I'm looking at right now that have a lot of people throw at me is that why is this so difficult with this thing called empathy? When I relate to people, worst case scenario is people can't be around anybody because of the fact that their pain or their intensity affects them. As a matter of fact, a lot of people were curious because they feel pain and they couldn't figure out if it was their pain or someone else's pain, right? I got people that can't go into offices or businesses in the daytime because there's too many people. They can't go into big markets. That's the extreme. On the other end of it, it's just confusion and a lot of defense and a lot of what we call polarization. When you join with a bunch of people that think like you don't have to ever pay attention to them because you know you're all on the same page. So it's pretty much you tied up in some BS, right? So how does this empathy thing work and what is the problem? And I teach some tools with that. So therefore, the questions come back to me. So let me see if I can explain it somewhat. Like life streams, it's very complicated, I guess. There's a lot of variables in it. It starts out with how do you secure the idea of you? And let me see if I can explain that. You have an imagined idea of who or what you are. You don't recognize that because you were born and you were kind of infiltrated with an imaginary idea. So an awful lot of that was not probably what you're born with, probably very little of what you're born with. But nonetheless, it starts to build momentum. How we secure that, when I say that name, is how do we pace that? How do we take an imagined idea of who I am and integrate it into 4 dimensions? How do we do that? How do we make that happen, right? So it's comfortable if you're sitting there saying, I don't do anything. Well, then you're probably not even listening to this video because you don't think you have any power, relationship, or any nature of influence. When I'm saying power, I just mean the ability to influence you or influence yourself or influence others. The advertising world has got it under control that we can be influenced. They're sold on that, right? You guys see lots of ads, so you know they're trying to influence you. And you've probably tried to influence friends that are depressed or sad or try to talk them into something or try to get a date or all of the above, right? So the really nature of human life is trying to influence others and being influenced. That's part of what I'm explaining. That's an empathetic piece of the need for it. So how do we secure that? Well, let's take another reference that it's a little easier for us to think in terms of how we secure and why evolutionary growth has a factor on that. Maybe growing up, somebody in your family put a mark on a door frame every year on your birthday. That's a very common story you hear. Or maybe it's just like you were trying to reach the sink and finally you got big enough where you could get your own drink of water, or turn on the light switch or the door handle. Those are all things that you and I have gone through in growing up, right? Those are all markers, right? So it's consistent. So we look at that and we secure into that. Probably by the time you were 18, 17, 16 years old, you never went on your birthday and someone put a marker by the door, right? That ended. When that fast growth ended, you never worried about reaching the sink again or turning the lights on. That ended completely, right? We secured in those markers for a period of time to pace ourselves, to develop the idea of us in a dimension called time. Those are called patterns, right? All the dimensions are called patterns. They're called patterns because putting a mark on a dorm frame every year on your birthday is a pattern. And a pattern runs for a period of time to secure the idea that you're growing. After that, maybe you go to a doctor once a year and get your blood pressure and your weight, another marker on a door frame. Or you do it yourself at home. You weigh yourself on the scale. Come on, I weigh myself every morning. So you still have this habit or pacing in time. You're trying to get a reference of how you're moving and how you're doing in a world of time, in a world of dimension. Now, why is that important? Because we can very quickly change there be a story in our head. We can start to get an illusion that we're somebody we're not. But if that doesn't work in the world, that's our gauge, right? If you're running around with a story that doesn't work, then you're really confused. And by the amount of sickness we have, it tells you there's a lot of people confused, right? Now, we're in an evolutionary meme, and that means that the background's changing. The background means the world you were born into now is altering a little bit. Can you imagine if, in fact, somebody put a marker on a door frame every year on your birthday and you could grow up? That would be a good marker, assuming the door frame never changed. But the door frame changed also, then that would have no value to you to mark anything. Now, that's why we say value changes. Now, maybe the door frame hasn't started moving yet or changing, but climate change has. That's a bigger piece that we marked our life for. Ask any farmer. It's a really big piece, right? Our whole food crop, huge amount of value comes from climate change. So really very important piece. So that's changing. And an evolutionary piece doesn't change. Well, it changes a little bit all the time, but it kind of makes a big change all of a sudden every few 100 years or so. So we're going through a big change now. So that's why we say it's a value change. It just simply means that when the background moves, then what's important or what we secured into in the background has changed, right? We have to just take a look at that. The most important marker we have for ourselves is other people. I don't care what your story is. If you relate to another person, if you see how they deal with it and you see how you deal with it, two things you're going to notice is that all us humans are very, very similar. And yet we're not all identical. So what does that mean? That means that if we notice what's really similar, those are secured markers. And then we move our attention to the uniqueness of us. And then we have something to offer the human race. We bring through some uniqueness. That's what spiritual growth is about. Spiritual growth is the theme of you. Spirit, not being a ghost, for heaven's sakes. It's the theme of you. The spirit of good fun, the spirit of good cheer, right? So it's the theme of you. If in the theme of me, I can recognize that, hey, I'm just another old person sitting around. I could be watching TV and instead I'm doing YouTube videos, because I start to recognize that the idea or the uniqueness of me is that I think in a different sort of way than other people do. It doesn't make me better. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of people that are upset with me because I do that. I give them a really big headache talking to them, and they have to think about things and they don't appreciate that growth. But we start to look at the uniqueness. You guys all have some unique pieces. I have some unique pieces. If we don't find a common ground, we can never identify the uniqueness. So when I talk for years, I've been talking about what do you secure into? That's what I'm talking about. We like to go walk in nature, which is what the background is there for, right? We like to go walk in nature because it doesn't change as fast as we do. We can secure, it's like that door frame. We can secure into that. Every year I can go out into the woods, the same place I went last year camping, and it's the same pretty much. Oh, there's a little more litter here and there. I can pick up some pieces. I can make it look like the same, maybe if I clean up a little bit. But I can secure into that. That's a dimension of space and time that I say, oh, I'm here, Chris, here now, enjoying this trip with my friends, right? I can secure into that. And then I can put an offering forth. I can bring my uniqueness to the table. And we can all then share that uniqueness, and that enriches the whole group. Now that's the goal, all right? So the tool that I taught, and maybe I can explain it a little better in its benefit. I came to this epiphany eons ago. I was working on a computer. I have a friend of mine who's most certainly a better computer whiz than I am, named Michael. And Michael was over my house, and we were rebuilding. He was doing most of the work, but I'm going to take credit for it. We were rebuilding a computer and put the motherboard in, and we were sitting there trying to get it all set up, downloaded. Like I said, he was really doing the work, but I'm there learning. And my wife was on that same room, and she was sitting over there on her computer, and she was actually in a bank account doing some financial things, right? Probably paying bills or who knows what. And that because we had just opened up that computer and started to load the utilities into it, we didn't have any firewire or anything like that. We were just in the early stages. And as we got the screen lit up, what she was typing on that one, because I didn't have a firewire, was showing up on my computer. She looked over and she saw that and she said, how come when I'm typing in a bank account that's secure show up on your computer? You hacking me? And I'm thinking, apparently so. So I immediately turned my computer off and said, we'll just solve this. We'll do this a different time. And we did. We put it off the next day. But I thought I'd have fun that night. So I turned my computer on that evening, and I'm sitting there with the computer running. Now, I'm not like a hacker because I had no control. I just would see that it would all of a sudden start typing what my neighbor was typing. It would start showing up. Somebody got some emails. I had no control for consistency. All of a sudden, something else would come on screen. I imagine the strongest signal was doing that. I don't know if that's normally come on. Computers are not my field. I don't know if that's a normal thing, but that next day, Michael came over, we installed the firewall, we did everything, and my computer went to operating normally and safe. But literally there for a while, I was interfacing with everyone else's stuff. It was very interesting. So I started, that's pretty much how that edgelord, we used to call edgelord or some silliness, because you could kind of feel that, right? Pretty much that edge or that firewire or that defense system starts to put a puffer. It reflects you back to you. So you think, the world's all about me because I see me. And then when you see someone else, the world gets to be a little different. So I put together a tool that I called Entrainment that I taught for years and years and years. In the very beginning, when I started, the terms were different. I played with it a little bit, trying to get an experiment of where it sits, right? How we could play with that. We might have reacted to one another instead of using words. We might have used emotions. I did that a lot in workshops. So we could start to see that your field wasn't a reaction to the words or symbols, but the reaction to the emotions. Get you a little deeper into what's going on with the person. So I developed this tool called Entrainment, and I've been teaching it ever since then. It's really very simply spoken, but not so easily integrated. I didn't put a lot of this is a tool that you play with to develop better. I just threw it on and said, play with it. I think there's a huge value in throwing it on and saying, play with it and see what comes of it, because then I learn and they learn, right? And we find out that what works for one person doesn't work for the other. So if I put too much structure in it, it eliminates an awful lot of people from learning. So the less you put into it, the better. So I started putting the tool out. It's very simple. I take the idea, that fireware, that idea that I'm Chris, I'm not you, and I sit it over here. It's really very easy to do because you don't have to think about something. You don't have to know something. You just have to, you feel it. When it moves over, you really feel it. At first, you almost feel unguarded. But as soon as you move that over, then you start to feel the other person that's across from you. You don't have to be having a conversation with them. They can be sitting there reading a book. You can feel them. You get a little sample what's going on inside them. And then you bring the idea back in again and you feel that disappear. And now it's all about you again. It's like, wow, this is really interesting. I can sample the two. I can feel you and I I can feel the similarity between you and I can feel the differences. I can feel what's going on inside you as you read that book. I can feel what's going on inside you as you look at that TV show. I can feel what's going on inside you as you sit there drinking your Starbucks coffee or wherever we find each other. It's like, wow, this is really interesting. And then I can put that barrier back and I go, wow. And then I can start to notice how you're different than me. All right. So this was one of the goals that we were trying to do when we were teaching way back, a long time ago in intuition, sitting there doing psychic readings, they called them, whatever. We were kind of doing the same type of thing. We were looking at, wow, what we used to call matching pictures in different pictures. Very complicated thing, took 6-7 months. Some people learn fast, some people are slow. This is just simpler. It's easier. We just can entrain with them. We just put that aside, bring it back, put it aside, bring it back. It's like that marker on the wall. You're putting marks on a wall. You very quickly start to find your uniqueness. You go, wow, that's very interesting. They're seeing it that way. And I don't see it that way. Now, does it benefit them? After you get good at this for a while, you're going to find that as you put that veil, I call it veil or valence, like a drape. It's the veil that, come on, this has been in history, right? Anyway, as you move that valence aside and you relate to them for a little bit longer, you're going to find that all of a sudden they start to identify that mark, like the little mark on the wall that your parents made. You could fully identify it. In other words, you'd be running around somewhere not on your birthday, noticing, wow, look how I've changed. You might even tell that story to friends, right? All right, so you got a drift of what this is. It's something that becomes more conscious. So if you sit there with that veil aside, not for hours, for a few more seconds, all of a sudden they can start to become conscious. They don't have to talk to you. They just start to feel that connection and they can feel that peace. And it makes them all of a sudden start to attend to themselves and starts to sort out what is another human piece, even though they don't know what you're doing, what's another human piece and what's unique for them. And then when you put it back in again, they might feel that putting back in, more likely feel that coming back, separating than they do the connection. But as you start to separate from them, then it's already sorted for them. They can, for a second, they can feel what's normal. And you might see them pause in reading their book, or they might just reflect, or they might kind of look up somewhere. Their eyes might go tracking back and forth, like this type of thing, because all of a sudden they're imagining things a little different. They're working with that unique piece. It's really a very powerful tool. Now, if your dilemma has always been that you feel everybody's stuff, you started playing with this, the first thing you learn, some people learn in a minute, some people learn in 4 or 5 years. First thing you learn is that that's not you. So then you start to go, wow. Beginning classes, students would come in and they'd have stories about their life. By the end of just a 6-week class, they'd say, wow, I walked past this guy on the street and I could feel the pressure in my head. And I thought, oh, wow, they must have a horrible headache. And I could just let it go. I hear those stories all the time. So a big group of people, majority, are able to do that. They feel that and they start to recognize, oh, that's not me. And they could just let it go. That's just it, right? We could just let it go. Then there's a next whole level of like, wow, I feel them and I can't stop it. So that makes me angry. So sometimes they get mad at that person, which is really kind of silly. Or sometimes they get mad at themselves, thinking they're doing something wrong. They judge themselves. It's like those markers on the wall. If all of a sudden the gap is not as big one year, do you think you failed growing? Do you think there was something wrong? Did your brother or sister get taller than you and you didn't grow as much? You see how we can judge external references very quickly? All right. So all this becomes the psychodrama inside you. It's like trying to evaluate all this stuff. It gets the uniqueness of you confused with all the other packages. In the entrainment, in the tool, when you move that aside and feel that person, feel me now, and then move this back, if I'm still feeling you, I need to intensify this. I need to increase the firewall. I just need to make this a little more secure. I need to make this a little more solid. But it's not to do. You just allow that to happen. You attend to that. You attend to it. Because we see people that have this firewall so solid that all they ever see is themselves. We call that narcissism. It's a form of mental illness. It just means it's all about me, right? We see people in some gradient, it's all about me. If some people have to always tell their story about what I've accomplished in life, they're trying to defend themselves. They're trying to say, look, I'm unique. If they don't have to tell their story, if they're always learning a new story, if they're always developing, then they're always becoming more unique. They don't have to tell anybody. So that becomes a resource. And that's what we're trying to work towards, right? So playing with this means that you're not making this piece that we bring in, you're not making it solid enough. You're not making it defensive enough. And people look at me and they say, how do we make that happen? It's just like practice. It's just practice. That's what it is. It just comes from practice. You notice it. For some people, it takes an amazingly long time. I've seen people work at this for 10 years and then all of a sudden get it. This is a gradient you can play with. Nobody told us when we were born that all these things we could play with, right? Come on, there are people that go to the doctor and get a blood test and get themselves on medication for life and everything else because they were just had a reaction, maybe to someone else. If they could play with this a little bit, they could start to get a better marker, more secure reference of who they are. You could start to notice, wow, my blood pressure's up. I'm reacting to something. Or maybe I need to get some exercise, or maybe I need to go on a diet, or maybe all of the above. Or maybe I'm put too much in my story and I can't secure it all because most of it's not working in the background. I can make up, we can all make up all kinds of stuff in our head that doesn't work out there in this world. Come on, I got a false background that we're looking at right now. It's not too bad. Looks better than my garage. You understand it's just a pretense. It's what we work in all the time in our life is a pretense. Most of the time it kind of works pretty good. When the background starts to change, then it gets to really chaotic, right? Then it's a mess. And that's where we're at right now. The background's changing. So that's the chaos we're in. Okay. I'm going to give you a simpler pattern rather than a time pattern that you can kind of play with. This is kind of what I used to do in classes and workshops. We used to call one where we work with patterns, we called Harmony. It was a 3-day workshop and we'd work with patterns. Some of them are easier to change. It's not that something different is better. It's something different starts to allow you a sense of like, how do I make that shielding out there thicker? How do I make it a little more of a buffer? I don't want it too calloused. I don't want it too indifferent. People that live in highly congested places have an interesting type of defense, right? And that's what we call culture. Culture naturally is the definition of how much defense we need between one and the other of us in a group, right? That's culture. Chinese have a total different culture. I'm just advocating that people go to Turkey, go to Morocco, go to China, go to Thailand, go to Canada, for heaven's sakes. It's really different in Canada than it is in the United States. All of those buffering are very, very different, very different. And you start to learn all this, but we don't all have the luxury of being able to travel around like that and do all those things. It's kind of a blessing here in the United States because we have a lot of people from different parts of the world. So if we interact with strangers, then we start to find that where that difference shows up also. It's just kind of fun, okay? So here's another pattern is internal, external. It's really simple because it's like inside, outside, right? Much, much simpler, right? Than time dimension, which is very confusing. It's like over how many years do you have? How many years? 12, 14, 15 years markers. But then, like I said, after that, you're still looking for markers with something in medicine or something in a test or something in a grading, because we're always looking for how to secure the idea of you, right? Got it? So inside, outside is much simpler. Why is that important right now in a changing environment? Why does Chris bring this up? I'll tell you. If I'm looking at, say, a virus that 2 out of every 100,000 people are going to die. Let's just make that up, right? Because that's a good story. Most certainly something in a changing environment, because it hasn't been that way for the last 76 years for me. So I can look at that. If it's external, out there in the world, 2 out of 100,000, outside, where everything is just a piece. 1, 2, 3. 100,000 is 100,000 different pieces. So outside, I look at that and I'm one of the 100,000. And since it's outside, and since it's like little pickets to fences, I can more associate to the majority than the minority. So I see myself externally of reference as part of the 99,998 people. Outside, that would be my natural piece, is to say, oh, I'm part of that. The risk is minimized. If I internalize that, bring it inside, then all of a sudden that's this as me. All of a sudden, I am one of the 2. You see how that works? I internalize it. I'm no longer 100,000 in here. I'm 1 in here. So I'm looking at the uniqueness now. I'm finding myself as, oh my goodness, not part of the 99,998, but part of the 2, internalized. So internalize, good news, brings up cautions, brings up fear, brings up apprehension. It should make you cautious, right? Because there's a risk. So it tells you that if you're at risk, personal, internal, I'm at risk, personal, internal, then therefore I should become part of the 2. I should really pay attention. I should do this. I should do that. I should do. All that is to some relative degree true. But you have to then define balance and influence. You have to recognize that statistic was designed to influence you, to internalize, to find a secure piece, secure the idea of you. That's a marker on a wall. That's all it is, right? So, but it doesn't mean that you quit growing. Doesn't mean there's no change right now. Don't hold your breath. You have to recognize that it's still just a statistic out there. So you have to find a balance between you and that reference. It has to be a balance piece. You have to look at that and say, wow, I don't have to be frightened. I don't have to put all my attention on the 2, because I'm going to fully identify with the 2, or one of the 2, which is probably not the wisest thing to do. But also it would be really stupid not to recognize that 2's there. So where do you sit in a buffer? Where do we all sit in this world that's totally at risk, and we're all going to die sometime? Do you get this? So as long as you have some uniqueness in who you are, your attention is not, oh my gosh, am I going to die tomorrow? Am I going to die this year? Or, wow, where could I go on a trip next year? What could I do with a group? What else could I talk about in a video? What other expanse can we go? What could I do with this experience called life? I'm sorry, balance is what's given us to find that place where we can move in the direction of our uniqueness, not by ignoring things, that's totally ridiculous, but by finding a balance between it. If somebody said, let's go walk on a wall, I'd say, hey, find me a wall, let me take a look at it, right? The wall looks like something that my 200 pounds is not going to come tumbling down off of. I'll say, yeah, get out of my way. I'll jump up in that puppy. I'll give it a try. I'm a risk taker. I don't have a problem doing that. I'll get up and give it a try. Come on. We can jump out of airplanes with parachutes. We can go skydiving. We can go deep sea diving. I've done all those things, right? Some of them I liked, some of them I didn't. Some of them scared the hell out of me, but I still did them again. Because that's what we do. We experience all those stuff because we're really experiencing the nature of being human. What is the package and what is the what is the extent of us humans and what is our uniqueness? We're balancing those two pieces. That's what growth is about. It's a little tougher right now with the background changing. It's a fake, it always was a fake background. Now it's just altering. In the next video, I might use a different background. I'm still the same Chris, still crazy ideas. You get this? You guys, what are we securing into? Are you looking at me or are you looking at the background? If the background changes and I had the same message, would that make a difference? That's kind of strange world that we live in. All right. So I think you kind of got to the gist of it. The tool is what I call entrainment. It's playing with that barrier out there, that buffer. I don't care what you call it. You call it the edge of your aura, or you got some psycho blabba, babbo, or whatever it is. Most certainly, when you do meditation, you internalize totally and you go inside. And as you move inside, you're not looking at the friction on the outside. You're just looking into that native piece called the package, called here I am, the jumble of just you, one piece, you. But you could go sit in a cave for 100 years and never accomplish any uniqueness on the planet. You can meditate all that time. The value is to go in to meditate for a short period of time. I'd advocate 20 minutes and then come on out and say, wow, I just got a refresher because I'm looking at me. And all this time I'm looking at everyone else and me and doing a comparative piece, which is what your intuition does, always compares. Wow, I just had to refresh and find my uniqueness. I had to feel that. And then when you come back out and you do this entrainment, you start to go, oh, okay, I remember what part of this package called me is me. And I remember the larger part, which is just human. So it's like, wow, this is kind of interesting. And then I know where to put my focus. So I know what to expand on, right? What I need to develop and where I need to go with it. So on that note, have fun with this little video. It's just a kind of interesting tool. Go ahead if you have any questions. It's Chris with 2 S's up at wizardscatch.com. If you have any questions, bounce them off of me. I'll answer your questions back. And keep the questions coming. I'll do some more of these videos and we'll take a look at what's going on in the world today. Okay? Sound like fun?